Dr. Elena Vasquez was elbow-deep in birthday cake frosting when her neural implant started screaming, not the gentle chime reserved for routine lab updates or the persistent buzz of department meetings she'd rather avoid. This was the full-blown migraine-inducing wail that meant someone, somewhere, was having the worst day of their lives. "Mom, you're making that face again," her 80-year-old daughter Mira said, chocolate smeared across her cheek like war paint. Elena forced a smile, but her implant kept shrieking. The priority code flashing in her peripheral vision made her stomach drop. First, contact medical emergency. After 15 years of xenobiology research, she'd fantasized about this moment. In her dreams, first contact involved dignified exchanges of knowledge, maybe some tasteful cultural artifacts, not whatever clusterfuck was currently requiring her immediate attention. "Honey, I need to take this call," Elena said, already backing toward her home office. "Keep the party going. I'll be right back." She sealed the office door and activated the quantum encryption field. The holographic display materialized instantly, showing the familiar sterile corridors of orbital station Kepler. Commander Jake Morrison's face appeared, his usual swagger replaced by something Elena had never seen before: genuine panic. "Elena, thank God. We need you up here now. Full emergency protocols." "What's the situation?" she asked, already pulling on her work clothes with practiced efficiency. "They showed up 3 hours ago. 47 species calling themselves the hegemony. Peaceful contact, cultural exchange, the whole 9 yards. Everything was going perfectly until one of their crew had an accident." Elena paused, her xenobiology training kicking into overdrive. "What kind of accident?" "Mining equipment malfunction. Something called a keth, about our size, crystalline bone structure. Lost a lot of blood. Their medical tech can't help because apparently their species has some genetic quirk that makes them incompatible with standard hegemony treatments, so they want our help." Morrison's expression darkened. "They want our blood." "Elena, direct transfusion. They think human blood might be compatible because we're carbon-based like most of the galaxy." Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature-controlled office. Her doctoral thesis had explored interspecies compatibility theory, but it had been purely academic. No one had ever expected to test it in the field. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, she said. The shuttle ride to Kepler felt both eternal and instantaneous. Elena spent the time reviewing everything humanity knew about alien physiology, which was precisely nothing until 3 hours ago. Her hands shook as she accessed the preliminary scans Morrison's team had managed. The Ket's biology was fascinatingly similar to human baseline. Iron-based blood, similar pH levels, compatible protein structures. On paper, it should work. The orbital station buzzed with activity that barely contained chaos. Elena had worked here for 5 years, but she'd never seen the corridors this tense. Security personnel tried to look casual while clearly being anything but. Scientists hurried past with equipment she didn't recognize, their faces mixing excitement with terror. Ambassador Yol met her at the medical bay entrance. Elena had seen the preliminary footage, but experiencing a 7-foot crystalline being in person was something else entirely. Yol moved with fluid grace, their translucent skin revealing a network of silver veins that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. "Dr. Vasquez," Yol said, their voice harmonizing in frequencies that made Elena's bones vibrate. "We are grateful for your assistance. Keth's condition deteriorates rapidly." "I'll do everything I can," Elena replied, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. The medical bay had been hastily converted into something resembling an alien operating theater. Keth lay on the table, their crystalline form flickering between transparency and opacity. Elena had seen trauma cases before, but never anything like this. Keth's silver blood had pooled beneath them, creating patterns that seemed almost artistic. "Their circulatory system is failing," explained Dr. Reams, Kepler's chief medical officer. "We've managed to stabilize the immediate trauma, but they need a transfusion within the next hour, or the cellular degradation becomes irreversible." Elena examined the readouts. Keth's biology was remarkably human-compatible. pH levels, protein markers, even the cellular structure showed promising alignment. She'd never been more confident about a theoretical procedure. "All right," she said, rolling up her sleeve. "Let's make some history." The transfusion setup took 15 minutes. Elena watched her blood flow through the clear tubing, dark red against the sterile white of the medical equipment. Around her, Dozens of beings from across the galaxy observed with what she assumed was the alien equivalent of held breath. The first drops of human blood entered Keth's system. Elena knew something was wrong before the monitor started screaming. Keth's form began convulsing, their translucent skin turning a violent shade of orange. The silver blood in their veins didn't mix with Elena's donation. It dissolved. "Cut the line," Dr. Reams shouted, but it was already too late. Elena watched in horror as her blood acted like concentrated acid, eating through Keth's circulatory system with terrifying efficiency. Where human and alien blood met, Keth's tissue simply ceased to exist. The crystalline being's form flickered once, twice, then went completely transparent. Keth was dead, and Elena had killed them. The medical bay fell silent except for the electronic death song of flatlined monitors. Elena stared at her own blood, still dripping from the disconnected IV line. 47 species had traveled across the galaxy seeking help, and humanity's first act had been accidental murder. Ambassador Yoel's bioluminescent patterns shifted to deep purple. "What did you do?" "I don't know," Elena whispered, then louder. "I don't know." The compatibility profiles were perfect. This shouldn't have happened. Dr. Reams was already running analysis on the blood samples. His face went pale as the results populated his screen. "Elena, you need to see this." She forced herself to look at the data, though every instinct screamed at her to run. The molecular breakdown was unambiguous. Human blood didn't just reject Keth's system, it actively destroyed it. At the cellular level, human blood was pure poison to the crystalline species. "Run it against the other species," Elena said, her voice barely audible. Reams' fingers flew across the controls, cross-referencing Elena's blood sample against the biological data from all 47 hegemony species. The results came back in real time, each one more damning than the last. Universal incompatibility. Human blood was toxic to every known form of galactic life. Ambassador Yoel's patterns shifted again, this time to a deep red that Elena suspected wasn't coincidental. "Your species," they said slowly, "is biologically incompatible with civilization itself." Elena wanted to argue, to explain that this had to be some kind of mistake, but the data was unambiguous. Humanity wasn't just different from the galactic community, they were antithetical to it. "This changes everything," Yoel continued, and Elena caught the subtle shift in their tone. The grateful ally was transforming into something else entirely. "If your blood is poisoned to all known life, what does that make your species?" Elena looked around the medical bay, seeing her colleagues' faces reflect her own growing horror. They'd spent decades dreaming of joining a galactic community. Now they'd discovered they were biologically designed to destroy it. And judging by Ambassador Yoel's increasingly hostile posture, the galaxy was starting to see them as exactly that. Destroyers. Part 2. Adaptation and Revelation. Elena spent the next 6 hours in the worst kind of scientific frenzy, the kind where every new discovery made the situation exponentially worse. She'd managed to convince Ambassador Yoel to delay any immediate decisions while she investigated the biological incompatibility. The request had been granted with the kind of cold politeness that suggested the hegemony was already discussing how to contain the human problem. The lab results were fascinating and terrifying in equal measure. Human blood wasn't just acidic to alien physiology, it was actively hostile. The iron-based hemoglobin that had evolved to carry oxygen through human systems acted like a universal solvent against every alien protein structure they'd tested. "It's almost elegant," Elena muttered, examining the molecular breakdown for the 100th time. "Our blood doesn't just reject foreign biology, it dismantles it." Dr. Reams looked up from his own workstation. "That's not the worst part. There's a worse part. I ran some preliminary tests on alien blood samples. Elena, their blood is just as toxic to us. We're not just poisonous to them, we're mutually incompatible with all galactic life." Elena stared at the data, feeling something between hysteria and despair. "So we can't help them, and they can't help us. We're biologically isolated from the entire galaxy." "It gets better," Reams said with the kind of dark humor that came from too many hours of crisis management. "I've been running atmospheric composition. Most hegemony species breathe variations of what we'd consider poison, and our oxygen, highly combustible to about 15 of their member species. So not only can we not share blood, we can't even share air. Welcome to humanity's galactic future. Permanent isolation." Elena felt her neural implant chime with an incoming message from Ambassador Yoel. The hegemony had reached a preliminary decision about Earth's status in galactic civilization. She accepted the call with the resignation of someone about to receive very bad news. Yol's holographic form materialized in the lab, their bioluminescent patterns now a steady, ominous orange. Dr. Vasquez, we have discussed your species' unique biological characteristics. The Hegemony Council believes that direct integration is impossible. Your physiology represents an existential threat to galactic life. However, and here Yol's patterns shifted to something Elena hoped was diplomatic rather than predatory. We are not unreasonable beings. Elena waited for the other shoe to drop. In her experience, sentences that began with, "We are not unreasonable," usually ended with something completely unreasonable. "We propose a conditional relationship," Yol continued. "Humanity may participate in galactic civilization through intermediary systems, robotic envoys, synthetic communication networks, sealed habitat exchanges. You will have access to our knowledge and trade networks, but direct biological contact must remain permanently prohibited." Elena felt a laugh building in her chest that probably bordered on hysteria. "So we're the galactic equivalent of a quarantined species." "That is not inaccurate," Yol admitted. "But consider the alternative." The alternative hung in the air, unspoken but clear. Species that couldn't be integrated were usually classified as threats, and threats were dealt with accordingly. "I need to consult with my government," Elena said. "Of course, you have 48 hours to provide an official response." The hologram disconnected, leaving Elena alone with the weight of humanity's future. She looked around the lab, at the blood samples and molecular analyses that had just redefined her species' place in the universe. They'd gone from potential galactic citizens to permanent outsiders in the span of a single day. Her neural implant chimed again. A personal message from Mira, wondering when Mom was coming home to finish the birthday party. Elena smiled for the first time in hours. Her daughter was 8 years old and had just inherited a galaxy where she'd never be able to touch another sentient being. But she'd also inherited a species that had survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and social media. Biological incompatibility was just another problem to solve. She opened a new research protocol and began typing. If humanity couldn't integrate through biology, they'd do it through technology. Synthetic blood substitutes, atmospheric processors, closed-loop life support systems. It would take decades, maybe centuries, but they'd find a way to bridge the biological gap. Elena had spent her career studying how different species could coexist. Today she'd learned that sometimes coexistence meant accepting separation, but separation didn't have to mean isolation. She started with the hardest part, figuring out how to explain to her daughter that she'd just become part of the galaxy's most exclusive club, the only species that could kill every other known form of life with a paper cut, but also the only species stubborn enough to see that as a challenge rather than a limitation. Elena saved her research, scheduled a call with the Global Science Council, and headed home. She had a birthday party to finish and a future to build, not necessarily in that order. After all, if humanity had learned anything over the millennia, it was how to adapt, even if adaptation meant learning to live apart in order to truly belong. The galaxy was vast, diverse, and apparently universally incompatible with human biology. Elena couldn't wait to see what her species would do with that information. Knowing humanity, they'd probably find a way to make it work anyway.